My wedding day was supposed to be perfect. Instead, my own mother shoved me down the church steps in front of everyone. As I fell, humiliated and heartbroken, a stranger's strong hand caught mine. I had no idea that this moment would change my life forever, or that he was worth billions. Hi, I'm Anna. And this is the story of how my worst day became the beginning of my best life. I never thought I'd be sharing this with anyone, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe you're going through something similar, and you need to know that sometimes when everything falls apart, it's actually falling into place. It was 6 a.m. on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was standing in my tiny apartment kitchen, flour still under my fingernails from my shift at Peterson's bakery the night before. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Who works the night before their wedding? Well, when you're making $8.50 an hour decorating cakes and cupcakes, you can't exactly afford to take time off. Every dollar counted, especially when you're paying for your own wedding. I remember staring at my wedding dress hanging on the back of my bedroom door. It wasn't new, and it definitely wasn't expensive. It was my grandmother's dress from 1962, the one she wore when she married my grandfather in that same little church where I was getting married in just a few hours. Mom had altered it for me, though she made sure to mention at least 10 times how outdated it looked. But I loved it. The lace was delicate, hand-sewn, and it smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Grandma always kept in her closet. Kevin was supposed to pick me up at 9. Kevin Martinez, we'd been together since junior year of high school, and he worked at the auto parts factory just outside town. He wasn't rich, he wasn't particularly ambitious, but he was steady, safe. And after growing up in a house where nothing ever felt secure, safe felt like enough. He made me laugh, he brought me coffee when I worked late shifts, and he never made me feel small for being happy with simple things. I should have been nervous about getting married, but honestly, I was more nervous about my family. The phone had been ringing all week with complaints. The church was too small, the reception hall was too cheap, the flowers weren't expensive enough. My sister Lisa had actually suggested I postpone the wedding until we could do it right, which was her way of saying until we had more money. My mother kept sighing whenever anyone mentioned the wedding, like she was personally embarrassed by the whole thing, but I was determined to stay positive. This was my day, and I was going to be happy if it killed me. By 10:30, my mother Helen had already called me 3 times. The first call was about the flowers. Apparently the daisies and baby's breath looked cheap and desperate. The second was about the church. She'd driven by and was mortified that people would see our family going into that little building. The third call was the one that really got to me. She wanted me to know that Mrs. Patterson from down the street had asked her about the wedding, and Mom was too embarrassed to give details. I hung up and just sat on my couch for a minute, trying not to cry and mess up the little bit of makeup I'd managed to put on. That's when my sister Lisa showed up, unannounced as usual. She took one look at me and shook her head like I was some kind of lost cause. "Anna, honey, it's not too late to call this off," she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she owned the place. "You could wait a year, save up some money, do this properly." Lisa worked as a secretary at a law firm and acted like that made her some kind of expert on everything. She'd never liked Kevin, thought I was settling, but what really bothered her was that I was happy with less than what she thought I deserved. "You could do so much better," she kept saying. "Remember when the Jenkins son was interested in you? He's a lawyer now, Anna. A lawyer." What she didn't understand was that I didn't want to spend my life trying to impress people or live up to someone else's idea of success. I wanted to wake up next to someone who made me coffee and remembered that I liked extra cream. I wanted simple and real, not complicated and shiny. But try explaining that to someone who thinks your dreams are too small. My dad William just stood in the corner during Lisa's whole speech, nodding along like he always did. He never really stood up for me, never told them to leave me alone. He'd just give me this apologetic look like he wished things were different but wasn't going to do anything about it. The drive to the church was quiet. Kevin held my hand the whole way, and I could tell he was nervous too. Not about marrying me, but about my family. He'd seen how they treated me, how they made me feel small, and it bothered him. "You sure you're okay?" he kept asking. I squeezed his hand and told him I was fine, but honestly, my stomach was in knots. St. Mary's was this tiny white church on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was beautiful in a simple way. The stained glass windows caught the morning light just right, and there were wildflowers growing along the walkway that someone had planted years ago and just let grow wild. It felt peaceful, like the kind of place where good things happened. Kevin's family was already there, setting up chairs and arranging the few flowers we could afford. His mom, Rosa, came over and hugged me so tight I thought she might cry. "Mija, you look beautiful," she whispered in my ear. Kevin's little nephew was running around in his tiny suit, and his sister was trying to get him to calm down but laughing the whole time. This was what family was supposed to feel like, I thought. Warm and messy and full of love. Then my family's car pulled up. I watched through the church window as they sat in their car for a few minutes, like they were gathering courage to come inside. When they finally walked in, I could see Mom looking around with this pinched expression, taking inventory of everything that wasn't good enough. Lisa was whispering something to her, and Dad just looked uncomfortable. The contrast between Kevin's family and mine was so obvious it made my chest hurt. I tried to shake it off. In 2 hours, I'd be married to Kevin, and maybe things would get better. Maybe once it was done, my family would see how happy I was, and stop trying to change everything about my life. I was still believing that people could change, that love could fix things. I had no idea how wrong I was. The ceremony started 20 minutes late because the pianist got lost, but honestly, I didn't care. I was just happy to finally be walking down that aisle. Kevin's face when he saw me made everything worth it. He got this huge smile and wiped his eyes, and I knew that whatever happened with my family, this part was real. This part was right. The church was small, maybe 40 people total, but it felt full of love. Kevin's co-workers from the factory were there, my friend Maya from the bakery, a few neighbors, some of Kevin's cousins who'd driven in from 2 states away. These were people who actually cared about us, who wanted to see us happy. For a few minutes, I forgot about my mother's disapproving looks and Lisa's eye rolls. Pastor Johnson had this warm, gentle voice that made everything feel sacred. He talked about love being patient and kind, about how marriage was about choosing each other every day. Kevin and I had written our own vows, nothing fancy, just honest words about how we felt. When Kevin started talking about how I made him want to be better, how I saw good in everything, I felt tears starting to fall. Then it was my turn. I looked out at Kevin, standing there in his borrowed suit with his nervous smile, and I felt this rush of certainty. This was right. We were right. I opened my mouth to start my vows, to tell him how much I loved his kindness, his steady heart, how safe he made me feel in a world that had never felt safe. But before I could get the first word out, I heard a chair scraping loudly against the floor behind me. My mother was standing up, in the middle of my vows, at my wedding, and the look on her face told me that whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be good. "I can't sit here and watch this anymore," my mother announced to the entire church. Her voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the peaceful quiet like a knife. Everyone turned to stare at her, and I felt my face burning with embarrassment. Pastor Johnson looked confused, Kevin looked shocked, and I just stood there frozen, still holding my vows in my shaking hands. "Helen, please," my father whispered, trying to get her to sit down, but she shook him off. She was on a roll now, and nothing was going to stop her. "This is a mistake, Anna, a huge mistake, and I won't pretend otherwise just to spare your feelings." I couldn't believe this was happening at my wedding, in front of everyone. "Mom, please, can we talk about this later?" I managed to say, but my voice came out small and weak. She ignored me completely and kept going. "You're 24 years old and you're throwing your life away," she continued, her voice getting louder. "You work in a bakery, Anna. A bakery. You never went to college. You never tried to do anything with yourself, and now you're marrying someone who's just as content to stay small as you are." The church was dead silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Kevin took a step toward me, like he wanted to protect me, but I held up my hand. This was my family, my mess to deal with. Maya looked like she wanted to tackle my mother, and Kevin's mom had this horrified expression that made me want to disappear into the floor. "You could have been somebody," Mom continued, and now she was pointing at me like I was on trial. "The Patterson boy asked about you last month. He's a lawyer, Anna. A lawyer. But instead, you want to play house with someone who's never going to amount to anything." That's when I finally found my voice. "Kevin is a good man," I said, louder than I'd ever spoken to my mother before. "He loves me, and I love him, and that should be enough for you." But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. And what happened next proved that some people don't just disapprove of your choices, they'll destroy them. I should have known better than to try to reason with her. I should have just ignored the whole outburst and continued with my vows. But I couldn't let her stand there and tear down Kevin like that, not when he'd done nothing wrong except love me exactly as I was. I stepped down from the altar and walked toward her, still in my grandmother's wedding dress, still holding my vows. "Mom, I know you think I could do better, but this is what I want. This is who I choose. Can't you just be happy for me? Just this once?" For a second, I thought I saw something soften in her eyes, but then Lisa leaned over and whispered something in her ear, and her face hardened again. "You're making a fool of yourself, Anna, and you're making a fool of this family." "How?" I asked, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. "How is me being happy making a fool of anyone?" That's when she said the words that still echo in my head sometimes. "Because you're settling for scraps when you could have had the whole meal. Because you're too scared to try for something better. Because you're weak." I felt like she'd slapped me. Weak. After everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built for myself, she thought I was weak. "I'm not weak," I whispered, but she was already shaking her head. "Yes, you are. You've always been weak. Content with less, afraid to reach higher, happy to be ordinary." She stood up fully now, and I could see she was really getting worked up. "Well, I won't watch you throw your life away. I won't pretend this is fine." I reached out to her, still hoping somehow I could fix this, still believing that if I just said the right thing, she'd remember that she loved me. "Mom, please." That's when she pushed me, hard, right in the chest with both hands, like she was trying to get something disgusting away from her. I stumbled backward in my heels, my grandmother's dress catching on my legs, and I felt myself falling down the stone steps of the church. Time slowed down in that terrible way it does when something really bad is happening. I remember thinking about how the dress was going to be ruined, how I was going to hit the concrete, how everyone was watching me fall just like my mother said I always did. I closed my eyes and waited for the impact, but it never came. Instead of hitting the cold stone steps, I felt a strong hand catch my arm, then another hand supporting my back. Someone had caught me. Someone had actually caught me. I opened my eyes and found myself looking up at a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with dark hair and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit, but that wasn't what struck me about him. It was the way he was looking at me, like I was something precious that he was relieved hadn't broken. "Are you okay?" he asked, and his voice was gentle but strong. He helped me stand up carefully, making sure I had my balance before he let go. I realized I was still holding my crumpled vows in one hand, and somehow that made me want to cry more than anything else. Yes, I think so," I managed to say, even though I wasn't okay at all. I was humiliated, heartbroken, and completely lost. But this stranger had caught me when I was falling, literally and figuratively, and something about that felt important. The church had erupted in chaos behind us. People were talking all at once, Kevin was shouting at my mother, and I could hear Lisa trying to defend what Mom had done. But this man, my rescuer, just stood there calmly, like he was a shield between me and all the noise. "Do you need to sit down?" he asked. "You've had quite a shock." I looked back at the church, at my ruined wedding, at my family who had just shown me exactly how they really felt about me. Then I looked at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to catch me when I fell. "I don't even know who you are," I said. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. "I'm Nathan," he said simply. "Nathan Cross. And I was just driving by when I heard the commotion. I'm very glad I stopped." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, pressing it gently into my free hand. "I don't know what you're going through, but if you need anything at all, please call me. No one should have to go through something like this alone." I looked down at the card. It said Cross Industries in simple, elegant letters. I had no idea what that meant, but something about the way he said it, the way he offered help without expecting anything in return, made me want to hold onto that card like it was a lifeline. Nathan disappeared as quietly as he had appeared, and I was left standing on the church steps in my torn dress, holding a business card and my ruined vows. The reality of what had just happened started to sink in. My mother had pushed me down the stairs at my own wedding, in front of everyone I cared about. Kevin rushed over to me, his face red with anger and concern. "Anna, are you hurt? I can't believe she did that. I can't believe your own mother." He couldn't even finish the sentence. Behind him, I could see my family getting into their car. They were leaving. Just like that, they were leaving. My father looked back at me once through the car window, and I thought maybe he was going to get out. Maybe he was going to apologize or try to fix things. But then, my mother said something sharp to him, and he looked away. The car pulled out of the parking lot without another word. Pastor Johnson came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Anna, I'm so sorry. In 30 years of performing weddings, I've never seen anything like that." He looked genuinely shaken. "Would you like to continue with the ceremony? We can wait a few minutes for you to collect yourself." I looked around at all the faces staring at me with pity and concern. Kevin's family, my co-workers, our friends, they all wanted to pretend this hadn't happened, to go on with the wedding like everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again after this. "I can't," I whispered. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I can't do this right now." Kevin nodded, even though I could see he was disappointed. "It's okay," he said, but his voice was tight. "We can do it another day, when things calm down." But I knew there wouldn't be another day. Something had shifted in that moment when my mother pushed me, when Nathan caught me, when I realized that the people who were supposed to love me most were capable of hurting me the deepest. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that church an hour ago. Maya drove me home while Kevin dealt with the guests and explained what had happened. I sat in her passenger seat, still in my grandmother's dress, still holding Nathan's business card, and tried to understand how my life had just completely fallen apart. I spent the next 2 days in my apartment, not answering my phone, not talking to anyone. Kevin came by a few times, but I pretended I wasn't home. I knew I was being unfair to him, but I couldn't face his disappointment or his attempts to make everything okay. Nothing was okay. Nothing felt like it would ever be okay again. Maya finally used her spare key to let herself in on the 3rd day. She found me on my couch, still in my pajamas, eating cereal for what was probably the 4th meal in a row. "Okay, that's enough," she said, pulling back the curtains and letting sunlight flood my dark apartment. "You can't hide forever." "Watch me," I mumbled, but she wasn't having it. "Anna, what happened was horrible, but you can't let it destroy your life. Your mother was wrong to do what she did, but don't prove her right by giving up." I showed her Nathan's business card, which I'd been carrying around like some kind of talisman. "This guy caught me when I fell," I told her. "I don't even know who he is." Maya took the card and studied it. "Cross Industries," she read aloud. "That sounds familiar." She pulled out her phone and started typing. After a few minutes, her eyes went wide. "Anna, do you know who this is?" I shook my head. "Nathan Cross. He's worth $3.2 billion. He's the CEO of Cross Industries. They own half the tech companies in the state." She turned her phone around to show me a photo from some business magazine. It was definitely him. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile. "That's impossible," I said. "Billionaires don't just randomly catch people at weddings." "Apparently this one does," Maya said, scrolling through article after article. Look at this. He grew up poor, built his company from nothing. He's known for his charity work, especially helping people get back on their feet after major setbacks. I stared at the business card in my hands. A billionaire had caught me when I fell, had given me his card, had told me to call if I needed anything. It seemed too crazy to be real. You have to call him, Maya said. I can't call him. What would I even say? Hi, remember me? The girl whose mother pushed her down the church steps? How's your Thursday going? But Maya was right about one thing. I couldn't hide forever. And something about Nathan, about the way he'd appeared exactly when I needed him most, made me think that maybe, just maybe, this was the universe giving me a chance to start over. It took me 3 more days to work up the courage to call Nathan. I must have picked up the phone and put it down 20 times. What do you say to a billionaire who saved you from complete humiliation? How do you explain that your entire life just fell apart and you're not sure how to put it back together? Finally, Maya threatened to call him herself if I didn't do it, so I dialed the number on the card. I expected to get some assistant or secretary, someone who would take a message and never pass it along. Instead, Nathan answered himself on the second ring. Nathan Cross, he said, and just hearing his voice brought back that feeling of safety I'd felt when he caught me. Hi, this is Anna, I said, my voice shaking. From the church. You caught me when I... Anna, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I was hoping you'd call. How are you doing? Something about the way he asked made me want to tell him the truth instead of just saying I was fine. Honestly, I'm a mess. I feel like my whole life just exploded, and I don't know what to do next. Would you like to have coffee? He asked. Sometimes it helps to talk things through with someone who's not connected to the situation. I almost said no. What could I possibly have in common with someone worth billions of dollars? But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me on those church steps, like I mattered, like I was worth catching. Okay, I said, but I should warn you, I'm probably not very good company right now. I think you'll be better company than you realize, he said. There's a little cafe called Sunrise on Oak Street. Do you know it? I did know it. It was one of those cozy places with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls, the kind of place where you could sit for hours without anyone bothering you, not where I would have expected a billionaire to want to meet, but somehow that made me feel better about the whole thing. I'll see you there at 2, he asked. See you there, I said, and hung up before I could change my mind. Walking into Sunrise Cafe, I spotted Nathan immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking nothing like the powerful CEO I'd seen in those magazine photos Maya had shown me. He stood up when he saw me and pulled out my chair, which was such an old-fashioned gesture that it made me smile for the first time in days. Thank you for coming, he said as we sat down. I wasn't sure you would. Honestly, I wasn't sure either, I admitted. This whole week has been surreal. Having coffee with a billionaire definitely fits the theme. He laughed, and it was such a normal, warm sound that some of the tension in my shoulders relaxed. I prefer to think of it as having coffee with someone who was in the right place at the right time. We ordered coffee and talked for almost 3 hours. Nathan asked about my job at the bakery, my dreams, what I loved about baking. He didn't ask about the wedding disaster, didn't pry into my family drama. Instead, he wanted to know about me, the real me, not the mess I'd become in the past week. I've always loved creating things, I told him, stirring my second cup of coffee. There's something magical about taking flour and sugar and butter and turning it into something that makes people happy. I know it's not ambitious or impressive, but it feels important to me. It is important, he said, and the way he said it made me believe he meant it. Making people happy is one of the most important things you can do. And you're wrong about it not being ambitious. I've been thinking about expanding into the bakery market for months. That's when he told me about his idea for a chain of artisanal bakeries, places that would combine high-quality baked goods with a warm community feel. I've got the business side figured out, he said, "but I need someone who understands the heart of it, someone who knows what makes people feel at home in a place." I stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance," he said. "A chance to build something from the ground up, to show people what you can really do when someone believes in you." It felt too good to be true, like something that happened to other people, not to girls who got pushed down church steps by their own mothers. But looking at Nathan, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, I realized that maybe good things could happen to me. Maybe I deserved them. "I'd like that," I said quietly. "I'd like that very much." The next few months were like living in a completely different world. Nathan wasn't just offering me a job, he was offering me a chance to discover who I could be when someone actually believed in me. The bakery project started small, with me developing recipes and concepts in a test kitchen Nathan had set up, but as my confidence grew, so did my role. I threw myself into the work like I'd never thrown myself into anything before. I researched different baking techniques, experimented with flavors, designed layouts for the bakeries that would feel welcoming and warm. Nathan encouraged every idea, challenged me to think bigger, and slowly I started to see myself the way he saw me, as someone with real talent and vision. Kevin and I officially broke up during this time, though honestly our relationship had been over the moment my mother pushed me down those stairs. He was a good man, but he'd been scared by what happened, overwhelmed by the drama and the sudden change in my circumstances. "You're different now," he told me when we met to return each other's things. "It's like you're becoming someone I don't recognize." He wasn't wrong. I was becoming someone different, someone stronger. The girl who had been content to work for $8.50 an hour and dream small dreams was disappearing, replaced by someone who stayed up late sketching business plans and woke up excited about the day ahead. My family tried to reach out once they heard about my new job, once the gossip mill told them I was working for Nathan Cross. Lisa called first, then my mother, both suddenly interested in having a relationship again. But I'd learned something important in those months. Real love doesn't push you downstairs and then try to climb back into your life when things get better. Maya was the only one from my old life who stayed constant, cheering me on and marveling at the changes she saw in me. "It's like you were this butterfly all along," she said one day, "but you were stuck in a cocoon that was too small for you." By the end of the year, our first bakery location was ready to open. Standing in the warm, welcoming space I'd helped design, smelling the fresh bread and pastries I'd perfected, I felt something I'd never felt before. Pride in what I'd accomplished. Not pride in settling for safe, but pride in reaching for something bigger and actually achieving it. Exactly 1 year after the worst day of my life, I was standing in front of the mirror in Nathan's apartment, getting ready for our wedding. This time, I was wearing a dress I'd chosen myself, one that made me feel beautiful and confident. This time, I wasn't nervous about my family ruining everything, because they weren't invited. It sounds harsh, but I'd learned that you can't let people who don't support your happiness be part of your most important moments. My mother had called a few weeks earlier, wanting to know about the wedding plans, assuming she'd be included. When I told her she wasn't invited, she was shocked. "But I'm your mother," she said, like that erased everything that had happened. "A mother protects her daughter's dreams," I replied. "A mother catches her when she falls, not pushes her down. You made your choice that day at the church, and I'm making mine now." Maya was my maid of honor, and Nathan's sister Claire, who had become one of my closest friends, was standing beside her. The ceremony was in Nathan's backyard, which had been transformed into something magical with twinkling lights and flowers everywhere. It was small and intimate, filled only with people who genuinely wanted to see us happy. When Nathan and I exchanged vows, I thought about how different my life was from where it had been a year ago. The scared girl who had worked in a bakery and dreamed small dreams had become a woman who co-owned 3 successful bakeries and was planning to expand nationally. More importantly, I'd become someone who knew her own worth, who didn't need anyone else's approval to feel valuable. "A year ago, I was falling," I said in my vows to Nathan, "and you caught me. But more than that, You helped me learn to fly." After the ceremony, as we danced under the stars, Nathan whispered in my ear, "Do you ever regret how we met? Do you wish your first wedding had worked out?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. If my mother hadn't pushed me down those stairs, I never would have met you. I never would have discovered what I was capable of. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads you exactly where you need to be. Our wedding was everything my first one wasn't, filled with joy instead of tension, surrounded by people who loved us instead of people who judged us. But the most important difference was who I was. The first time, I'd been a girl trying to make everyone else happy, desperate for approval and acceptance. This time, I was a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. Nathan's family had welcomed me from the beginning, treating me like I'd always been part of their story. His parents, who had built their own success from nothing, understood the journey I'd been on. "It's not where you start," his father told me once, "it's how far you're willing to go." As the evening wound down and our guests started to head home, I found myself standing on the same back porch where Nathan and I had had our first real conversation about the future. Maya came out to find me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts?" she said, handing me a glass. "Just thinking about how different everything is," I said. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now? Now I realize I hadn't lost anything that was actually mine to begin with. The people who really loved me were still there, and the people who didn't, well, they showed me who they were." Maya clinked her glass against mine. "To new beginnings," she said. "To new beginnings," I agreed. Later that night, as Nathan and I lay in bed talking about our honeymoon plans and the future of our bakery chain, I thought about the girl I used to be. She wasn't weak, like my mother had said. She'd just been waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right push to become who she was meant to be. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your real life. Sometimes you have to fall before you can learn to fly. And sometimes, when you're falling, the universe sends exactly the right person to catch you and show you that you were never meant to stay down.